Welcome, everybody, to our Lift Up Women in Life Sciences live broadcast today. Georgia, my co host, and I, we're back, and this must be for, I think, the 22nd live broadcast since
Yeah.
2022's launch. So we're super excited to be back, and we're talking about navigating the return to work journey. So, life after leave. And this is covering the whole topics from sabbaticals, illness, parenthood, redundancies. So, lots to talk about today with two fabulous life sciences key experts that are going to be joining us. But before we do, I know that we have a lot of regular attendees, but for those of you that are completely new to joining the Lift Up Women in Life Sciences community group, we here are all about connecting, inspiring, and championing other women within the life sciences space. We created the group in the summer of 2022.
Seems like ages
Um,
ago now.
it does, doesn't it? But we very much wanted to bring the women of Fraser Dove International together to look at how we could leverage our wonderful relationships of senior experienced life sciences experts to help, like I say, champion and inspire other individuals within the industry climb, break that glass ceiling, through that glass ceiling, and also dropping that career ladder down to the next generation. And for those that are in academia that want to transition into the industry for the first time. So it's snowballed. We've had over 50,000 global views now since going live. We get anywhere between sort of 300 and 900 live attendees every month. And we're spinning off into all sorts of different things, podcasts, conferences, blogs. So super excited to be expanding this community group. But I'm going to give you a little introduction into myself. So I am Louise Williams. I'm the MD here at Fraser Dove International, the Life Sciences Executive Search Talent Consultancy. I've been in staffing for about 20 years now this year, 10 years specifically in life sciences, where I was focused in the clinical and medical space before moving into managing contract and permanent teams, and then operations, and then MD now at Fraser Dove. I've got two wonderful children. I've got a 7-year-old daughter and a 3-year-old boy that also keep me very busy outside of work. So that's a little bit about me. I'm going to pass this over to you, Georgia, now, if you'd love to do an intro.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Louise. My name's Georgia. I've been here at Fraser Dove for the last 2 years. And like Louise, my expertise really sort of is in that clinical and medical space. So anything from translational medicine, clinical development, clinical operations, medical affairs is very much my sort of bread and butter. But outside of that, I recently completed my master's in migration studies, which is something I'm so passionate about. And that had a focus on sort of feminist literature as well. So it's been amazing, really, to sort of get involved and lift up and have a part in sort of snowballing it.
Thank you, Georgia. Yeah, it's great to have you as well as an ambassador in these live events. So, as always, what we'd love to say is hello to the network. We get anywhere between about 60 and 100 comments come through. So, we always want to encourage everybody that's dialing in today to say hello in the comments. It's great for everybody to build this community and network together. Also, pop it in where it is you're dialing in from. We get such a great global reach, and perhaps what area of life sciences you're in as well. And also to add to that, for those of you that are new, this is an interactive live event. So as we move throughout the broadcast, what we try to encourage is if you've got any questions for our key speakers, Sarena and Christina, pop in a Q in front of your question in the comments, and it will just make it easier for Georgia to navigate throughout the comments and try and share some of your questions with them directly. So, without further ado, I can't wait to bring Sarena Lin into the broadcast. Hello, Sarena. Could you
Hey,
do an
Louise.
introduction? Thank you for joining us today. Do an introduction to our audience, please.
Sounds good. Well, thank you, Louise, and thank you, Georgia. Thanks for having me on this. I'm very excited. My name is Sarena Lin. I have the privilege of being in the life sciences space probably over the last 20 years or so. Started as a consultant at McKinsey, left McKinsey as a partner about a dozen years ago, and have been in agriculture, nutrition, animal health, and pharma companies over the last dozen years or so. My last role was the Chief Transformation and HR Officer for Bayer, based in Germany. Stepped down from that role about 7-8 months ago, and I'm currently on the supervisory board for Siemens Healthineers, as well as for Berkman Clinics, which is a specialty clinic based out of the Netherlands. Currently based out of Germany, have a 16-year-old at home. So you all know what it's like to have a teenage girl at home, but absolutely great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Sarena, and really looking forward to delving into this. A brilliant career, very inspirational journey within life sciences. And likewise, Christina, very pleased to have you as part of this broadcast today. If you would mind doing an introduction to the audience.
Good, absolutely. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Really happy to be here with all of you today. My name is Christina Mack. I'm the Chief Scientific Officer at IQVIA, which is a large healthcare company. I'm an epidemiologist. I'm an engineer. I've been working in life sciences in either a technical or scientific or both capacity for about 2 decades. I have 3 children, so I don't yet know what it's like to have a teenage girl, Sarena, but I'm so glad to have you on the end of the line to ask you when needed. I have 3 children. I have 2 girls, 2nd grade and 5th grade, and then a son who's in 7th grade. And I live in Chapel Hill, North Carolina.
Thank you, Christina. 3 children. I know I feel like 2. 2's quite hard work. But thank you for sharing.
As well, so.
Yeah. And mine aren't teenagers yet either, so I've got that to come. But yeah, thanks, Christina, for joining us today. Also a very inspiring career journey. I want to jump into the audience. Thank you so much, Juan. He's ready to learn, so thank you for joining us today. We have got Sarah dialing in from Zurich. We've got our head of MedTech here within Fraser Dove, who's really looking forward to joining in this live. We've got Maria here as well from Nyon. Hello, Maria. We got Paolo from BCN. We got Kathleen from Zurich. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us. I can't keep going. In fact, there's quite a few, but keep the comments flowing. It's nice for you all to communicate as well. And I'm going to throw this over to you, Georgia, with I think the first question.
Definitely. I would love to start off and really sort of dive into why Lift Up is important to you both as a community. So, Christina, coming to you first.
Sure. I mean, to me, we are each other's superpower. And so, we are kind of part of this beautiful global community where we're not running into the grocery store or the coffee shop to each other, and we haven't been for a while. So building and, I think nurturing these communities and creating these relationships is really important. I think our networks, and I think that word gets a little misconstrued, but when we really truly talk about our network, people that have inspired us, people that we can reach out to, people that are doing something that we might someday want to do, and they're kind of willing to share their experiences, and we're each other's superpower. Those connections are, and so I feel really grateful to be able to join this community. I feel grateful to all of you who are attending to have helped build it. And I can't think of anything kind of more important than us continuing to have these discussions.
I love that. Thanks, Christina. And Sarena, same question to you. Why is it important for you to be part of Lift Up?
Well, I love Christina's superpower. It's fantastic. I think to build on that, to me, a community like this tells us that we're not alone. Right? I think we face many issues and challenges in our daily lives, and life sciences is one of those highly exciting but also very complex industry. And sometimes, in our daily work, we might feel like, my gosh, I'm alone in this. I'm very lonely. And I think a community like this provide that kind of support that many of us need at different point in time, right? Globally, virtually, but yet hopefully in a way that is opening and welcoming and inclusive. And I think this is what we all need. So really, really glad to be part of it.
Thank you, Sarena. I think that we were sharing the other week that we got connected 2 people together not long ago, and they were actually 25 minutes down the road from each other in Chicago, and we actually genuinely had no idea. So they ended up going out and having a coffee in that, but it was lovely, and that's what hopefully this community group does, is it brings people together. So thank you for sharing that. I think what we wanted to try and kick off with from a question perspective, because this is quite a broad topic, and so why is it we're talking about this topic today, and why do you feel this is an important topic to talk about? Because I think it goes beyond, sometimes people think return to work and automatically think of motherhood and returning after a child, which absolutely plays a significant part in this topic, but I think it covers all areas. But Christina, come to you first with your thoughts on this.
Sure. So I remember a moment early in my career where my first job was at Johnson & Johnson, and it was an awesome job. And Johnson & Johnson is one of the best companies in terms of kind of nurturing a career for its employee. And I had a really clear view of a career ladder that was awesome and exciting. And I was 23. And I kind of remember having this moment of, I need something a little bit less neat. I want something that's going to feel like an adventure. And again, I look back, and this was actually one of my favorite jobs I've ever had. So I was very happy, but I still kind of felt this need to make sure my career was an adventure, and that it was kind of part of my life's adventure, right? Because you spend a lot of time in your career. So that for me really kind of spurned, a wonderful job at J&J for some time. I then kind of moved across the world. I lived in Africa. I worked for the Clinton Foundation on the Global Fund, evaluating HIV/AIDS programs in the Caribbean. And then I, came back and took a job at I think I was employee number 30 at a small company in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So, really, I think I'm sure many of us on the line, maybe all of us that are on the line, kind of see a career as an adventure, and it's got twists and turns and curves, and we are kind of piecing things together to make sure that it's the puzzle that we want at the end, and that we kind of enjoy that journey. And so I think that's why we need to talk about it. There's insecurities there, and there's a lot of joy there, and how do we get the right mix of an adventure?
Yeah, I love that. And that's a nice personal story to share. And sometimes people do think, oh, I've got to get into an organization. Maybe less so now, because we're finding tenure dropping, significantly versus 10 years ago. But there was this period of time where you'd kind of get in and you'd think, well, for me to get to an X position or climb, there is only one ladder. It's like a straight ladder up. It isn't this kind of how did Lynn Sullivan describe it, like a jungle gym, where you're kind of learning lots of different, and you're not necessarily going one route up, but you have to also spend 10 years in one organization, or a long time in one organization, without a career break or a sabbatical, people facing burnout. It's quite a different landscape now, I think, to what it was 20, 30 years ago. But Sarena, I'll come to you with the same question. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's just it, right? I think it's probably a bit of a misnomer, especially after COVID, after what we all experienced, to think that life and work are two separate things. In fact, I never liked the term work-life balance, right? It seems like you're trading off one versus the other. I said, look, I only have one life. Work is part of my life, and I need to think about how to balance my life, given the different needs and different life stages at different point in time, right? And I think, like Christina, I have taken my own leave and returning to work, but probably more importantly, throughout my career, I always feel this need to sometimes step back and take a little bit of pause, right? To recharge, to refresh a little bit. And I do think, especially looking at peers and looking at colleagues around me, especially during COVID, I think it becomes even more important for us to say, look, life is more important than just having a career ladder, right? Life is about balancing the need to take care of sick parents, balancing the need of taking care of teenage kids. I had a colleague that came to me and said, look, Sarena, I need to take 6 months off because my daughter is going through a very difficult transition. I said, fantastic, go for it.
Yeah.
And another colleague 2 years ago said, look, Sarena, I'm just feeling burned out. I need to take a year of sabbatical. I'm going to go to Africa and I'm going to go to Costa Rica, two very different places, and I want to experience life differently. I said, fantastic, go for it. And I think ultimately, we know what sort of fills our boat, right? And fills our life mission. And that's what, to me, is so important, that, you have the ability and the courage, right? To say, I'm going to do what's right for me. And that's part of the life stage.
Yes.
And yes, there is potentially, it's a stage, there's an end to it. So you need to find a way to get back to whatever you want to get back to. It might very well be a full-time work, it might not be, right? And I think that's that transition we're talking about. But it's not, to me, it is so important for us to say, this is part of within our control of what I want to do with my life, and how I continue to manage that transition, so that my life is full, right? And I think that's why this topic is important.
I think it's so important. I think pulling out some of the things that you're saying there, Sarena, as well. I look at it like a two-prong approach where, you as an individual have almost got to have that confidence and courage to kind of, put yourself out there and say, I need to give myself this time. I know I could be a better person in 6 months, 12 months time for it, whether it's burnout or needing to spend time with family, whatever that might well be. But I also think that maybe businesses are starting to become more aware from an employer perspective that they have to kind of offer a little bit more of that flexibility and have that open mind approach if employers are coming to them with that because of burnout or the longer term gain potentially even from an employer's perspective. Is it better to go and have somebody take 6 months time out for themselves to get themselves into a better mindset and place, or to not, and maybe their performance dips and and then it kind of affects the business and them as an individual. So do you feel that businesses are a little bit more open-minded to this kind of culture and way of working and conversations with employers now than they were, Sarena?
I absolutely, right. In fact, I think one thing you said that's really important, Louise. I personally think that we're at a stage where we are all taking care of our own life and career much more than ever before, right? In fact, smart businesses and smart employers will realize very quickly if they don't understand how to address my individual needs, they will lose talent, right? And I think that's going to be the constant tension where there will be traditional, employers who say, no, you got to come in 9 to 5, and those might not be the right companies for you to stay with, right? But I think for more progressive companies will realize today's talent, all of us have different needs and different values. And, smart companies will have to address those, to continue to attract, retain talent. So absolutely. And I think the supply and demand will continue to evolve along those lines.
Absolutely. And I think with this, with talking about the demand and the demand in, equality generally, but especially in the gender space. And when we're starting to look at leadership level, and that gender balance between, senior leaders in the business from male to female and female still being significantly low, I think it's important more than ever that we're getting, whether it's from a parenthood perspective and women back into, the industry and back into the market after having a child so they can progress and develop their career is more important than ever as well, to get a bit more of that gender balance at senior leader level. I feel like there's a lot here we can dive in and we can talk about. So one of the questions I think that came out of our community group was, what are some of the most common challenges perhaps that individuals do face when transitioning back into work? I think we've got some good solutions and some ideas that we can talk about, but maybe it's worth us highlighting what is it that people perhaps face from a challenging point of view. Christina, come to you with this.
Yeah. And Louise, I think just before I jump into that, just to kind of focus our conversation, I mean, I love and could talk all day about kind of the, personally taking time off either because you want to have an adventure or because you need a personal break. But I think we should also kind of say out loud that a lot of the time, and especially as women, we are taking a break because we have to, and we also have to work, right? I mean, we work because we need to earn a living to have a home and buy food and do the things that we need to do to live. But as the workforce has opened up to women, the workforce has had to open up to caretakers. And so we have to take time off to have our children. Sometimes we have things we need to take care of our parents. We need to take care of our kids. We might have a health issue. We need to take care of ourselves. And that return to work, I think, is different to navigate than a return to work after, a 23-year-old or 25-year-old, kind of takes a break to have an adventure. I think they're two very different things. And so when we look at this question, it's important to acknowledge that often we take breaks because they're important to take, and then we need to go back to work, and we kind of still have that pull from the break. So we took a break to have a kid, and then we come back to work after we had that child. And so what are the challenges that they face? And so, I mean, when I think about that, I think there's part of kind of what's in our own mind about our personal story when we come back and the confidence that we bring along with that. Because I know when I had two of my kids while I was in a PhD program. And so there was kind of a part of me that felt like, I've been off. I was home with my kids and I was working on the PhD. And so I'm kind of this student looking for a job in my early 30s. That's a pretty different story in those interviews than I have a lot of really great work experience. In my PhD, I've done these things. I've also been working and consulting on the side. I'm like a relatively senior person in my early 30s. And here's what I bring to the role. Those are two different ways to think about how I'm going to approach coming back to work. And I think it's really important for women to make sure that they articulate that second story around all of the value that they bring to work and what they're looking for, and make sure that they're connecting with the employers that see all of their experience. I connected with some employers who in my early 30s counted, I think, 1.5 years of experience when they kind of totaled it up over my resume. The job that I did take, which is my current role at IQVIA saw my global health experience as valuable. They saw my IT experience at IBM as valuable. They saw my J&J experience in a technical role as valuable. So they could see that whole comprehensive list. And so that was the employer that I chose to work with, because
Of course.
I had a story to tell them that was true, and they understood it and kind of could see the innovation inherent in that and the creativity. And so that was the match. So I think we've really got to think about what's our value, how do we explain it, and then let's make sure we choose someone who sees what we're bringing to the table.
I love that. It's that value alignment, isn't it? It's so important. I think that's really, and I had somebody share a story with me not long ago, a couple of months ago, and the story was very much that she had a child that had passed, her only child, very sad, but due to the illness in which her child had, she actually then went and took some time out and worked for a charity and an institute that was supporting effectively that illness. And for about 18 months to 2 years, she was really dived into that therapeutic kind of niche and area and understanding it more, and trying to support it. And then when she decided to return then back to work, she really struggled. There were quite a lot of organizations that turned around and just saw the fact that she'd had 18 months to 2 years as a career break and didn't work. And ultimately, her response was, well, I'm not interested. If they're not, if that's how they perceive my 18-month, 2-year gap. And instead, she went and landed, I think it was a CQO role in the end in the US for another organization that actually saw all of her breadth of experience up until that point, and then saw the therapeutic area experience and her knowledge of what she'd learned and life experience she'd gained over that past 18 to 24 months, and only saw that as a pro. And then she just thought, this company gets me, we're value aligned, this is where I need to be. And it was a really nice story. So I think backing up what you're saying there, Christina, it's really important that if you're returning to work, you are also returning to a company that understands you, supports you, and is value aligned. I love that. So Sarena, come to you with the same question. What are your thoughts around this and some of the common challenges, I guess, you feel that people face?
Yeah, I think probably along the similar lines. I sort of see the challenges, maybe just simply put it in two buckets, right? There's one which is really truly internal. Me coming back to work after, 6 months, after a year, do I still have the skill set needed to be successful in what I want to do, right? Do I still understand how to navigate the environment I'm in? Because the truth is, internal, whether it's organization culture or sometimes politics change after 6 months, after 12 months, right? So can I still navigate that? And, of course, internally, if my family situation has changed, I now have, new babies at home, can I still take care of it, right? It goes back to the term I don't like, but still captures it, right? Work-life balance, right? Can I take care of a newborn baby at home and still give my 100%? So there's an internal piece in terms of mentally confidence. Do I have that? As well as potentially practically, right? Can I manage my new life situation when I return to work? But I think probably the more challenging piece is this, call it, external piece, right? Which is kind of what we all talked about from a perception perspective. Do people around you, your team, your managers, the organization, how do they perceive you? And I think there's a general fear. Sometimes are true and sometimes are perception, right? The fear that, gosh, now you're back with a baby in tow. Are you still dedicated? right? Are you still dedicated? And that goes through in the back of a manager's mind all the time. Or even teammates might say, gosh, this person now has baby at home, does it mean that I have to pick up more slack? Right.
Yeah.
So there's a perception. Are you still dedicated? Can you really balance your new life situation? Right. And I think a second piece is exactly what we all just talked about, is this question of, as I return to work, did my manager, did my organization value this time of absence? Right. And by the way, do I value it myself? Right. Because sometimes we discount it. I mean, to both of your stories, sometimes we discount it and say, well, gosh, I took 6 months off to have a baby. Yeah. My gosh, how did I grow personally? Right? And sometimes we poo-pooed it and say, oh gosh, that was a blank on my CV. But my gosh, for all of us who've gone through motherhood or go through any sort of life-changing experiences, we all know, right? You learn so much about yourself.
Oh, 100%.
And how you deal with life, challenges during that period of time. So I will say, don't discount it yourself, right? The challenge is both internally, we discount that experience ourselves, and externally, right? From the organization perspective, as we all said, gosh, it doesn't show up on your CV. So people think that, gosh, you spend a 6-month blank. Come on.
Yeah.
Right? So I think, to me, the challenges are both, some of these, yes, actual logistic challenges, but really the internal mindset, how you think about it, how you're being perceived externally and understanding, right? Or how that perception comes about are probably some of the things that, the first step, if you will, right? For you to sort of be able to navigate these challenges when you return to work.
Yeah, and I think this term perception is a really important one, isn't it? Because I do think employers, they do, but I think from my recommendation is that, that's where the communication and the clarity really comes hand in hand, because potentially sometimes organizations will have that perception, and unless you communicate clearly and give them some clarity, and what ran through my mind, Sarena, when you were saying that, was because probably one of the hardest periods I've ever worked in my life over 20 years is that 9 months before I was going off with my first child and post actually me having children, right? And I remember I was made an AD, about 12 months before I was then fell pregnant. And I worked so hard up until literally the dot before I think I literally worked 2 weeks before I then, popped. Because, it was kind of this thought process of wanting to be as successful as I could and as much money as I could, but also wanted to come back, if I'm honest, and come back feeling like I could have some flexibility, either part-time or easing myself, and I knew that my employer would give me that if I demonstrated I was a hard worker. And lo and behold, on my first maternity leave, I was actually 3 months into my mat leave, and I got offered a promotion even whilst I was on mat leave. And then when I returned, I got offered it, but I still had to prove myself for 3 months. And I managed to do that, and then secure working 4 days a week for what has been now the last 7 years. So that perception that employers can sometimes give of, oh, mum returners, are they really, are they fully dedicated, or, do they want to be at home? It's like, actually, that's the complete opposite with me. So I just think everybody's different, and communication is really, really important, both sides of the fence.
Yeah, I like the idea of, we can't control other people's perceptions of us, and so other than clearly communicating. So, and when we talk about kind of knowing our value, part of it is, I know my value, I've communicated what I can bring and my needs, and then at some point I think we have to kind of let go of what other people's perceptions are, and speak our truth, and then be our incredible selves. And if that's not recognized, then that's not recognized. But I also, one of the things I love, and I did this, but my team has also probably really inspired me in this way, is just being very creatively practical about what you can do. So, yes, you will have additional boundaries when you come back after a leave, if it was around family. And I think that saying what you need and then showing how it can work is great. And I would bring up an example from COVID, because I think especially caretakers of children and small ones during COVID, we had really weird solutions if we stayed in the workforce. I had probably one of my most busy scientists that was doing incredible epidemiologic work on COVID. She was really, really busy. She had small kids. and she could only work a half day because she and her husband both work, and they had to split the day, and they had 2 and 3 year olds, like they don't watch, you can't not be with them. And so, in the busiest time of our life, she can only work 4 hours during the workday. And so she came to me with this problem, and she came to me with a lot of ideas, and she probably had the most successful year of her life working that way because she was very creative with how she filled it in. She was very clear about what she wasn't able to do. And, we got through it. And I think that I know she's very proud of what she was able to accomplish, but it was kind of this trust, honesty. She knew exactly what she was bringing to the table. She wanted to do it. And, she got through it with flying colors. So I think we've got to kind of trust ourselves that we can make some of these odd arrangements work, either for a short period of time, which is sometimes all we need, or for the long term.
Yeah, that real sort of clear communication, I guess. I mean, with that sort of being said, I mean, what way do you think individuals can effectively communicate their needs? Would you have any advice on this? Perhaps coming to you first, Sarena?
Yeah, I think, building on Christina's story, to me, my experience is the first thing is that you got to know what your boundaries are, right? And I think only you know, and nobody else can tell you, right? If I have to say, look, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I got to get off work at 3:00 because I absolutely need to pick my kids up, okay? Or, for me, it's actually, gosh, every month I'm going to go do a facial, right? So Friday afternoon, I'm going to leave, and my team all knows that, right? So to me, and it's not being apologetic of what your boundaries are and be able to communicate effectively is half of the game, and half of the success, because only you know what your life, work-life balance is. I love Christina's story of the scientist who said, look, I can only work half day, but guess what? I'm as effective as ever, right? Because ultimately it's the outcome and the effectiveness that we want to measure, not the number of hours, right? So knowing your own boundaries, being able to communicate confidently, that's probably the first thing. And the second piece is help find a solution, right? So don't throw a problem out there, right? Whether it's part-time, whether it's, hey, shifting work hours, or, in Europe, it's one thing that, I tried in my former organization is actually encouraging a lot of job sharing, right? So go find somebody or work in a small group of teams and say, hey, can we have all flexible sort of work arrangements? We work among themselves as long as we can all get work done, right? So job sharing is yet another one I think that's really, really cool. So, bring solutions to the managers or to the HR organization that says, look, I have these, boundaries, but guess what? It doesn't affect the outcome and the deliverable of what needs to be delivered. And I think those are probably the two things that's most important to keep in mind.
Really sort of taking control of the narrative and being solution oriented and sort of coming to the table with your skills and obviously successes. And
Absolutely.
Christina, have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'll make kind of 3 points. I think one, just on that kind of being creatively practical piece. So my example of my incredible employee, one of the things we figured out while we were talking about this was that, we were trying to get a bunch of papers out as well as doing population health work, which was the most important thing, preventing infection. And so there was a benefit to actually having her shift some of her hours out of the workday to the nighttime, because she could address some of the hard scientific writing in a time that kind of works for her. It's quieter. And we actually we were probably more prolific at the end of the day with her shift in the schedule. So around the communication of the boundaries, just remembering to communicate why it could actually be beneficial. It helps my team that I like to work early in the morning because they're in London, and I can be off to see my kid's soccer game after 3 because I've already kind of gotten everything out the door by the time the US workday. I mean, that's a value proposition, not a personal need that I need you to help me with, right? It's a value proposition. So I think that's important in the communication. I think remembering that some of this stuff is long-term and some of this stuff is very temporary. With a new baby, you can figure out a great schedule and that's going to work for you for 3 months because your baby's going to have different needs in 3 months, and then you're going to have different needs to follow this kid. And I mean, I think we're on a quarterly review cycle with our babies for a couple of years. And then, you've got elementary school. And then I think that middle school has, for me, had different timing needs and boundary needs. And I'm assuming, I'm going to call Sarena when it happens, but high school is going to be different as well. So I think knowing that there's a timing component, that this isn't, I need to quit my job because this is forever, or I need to be part-time forever. It's, I kind of need to meet my family in this moment. is kind of a good way to think about it, and just know how long you may or may not have that boundary. And then the third thing is, I think we are very lucky, and thank you to all the women that have come before all of us. We're kind of in a moment today where most employers know it's the right thing to do to support and empower women and anyone that has kind of family needs, and they don't always know how. And so to be the person to educate them on, hey, I need this because I have a new baby. It's, can we talk about it for a year? Here's how it adds value. And here's how it's not going to be an issue for us. In fact, it might help us. Actually helps our bosses who might not have gone through that, or our companies that may not really know how to help women. I think by instructing them, many of them, I think, will find they're ready to meet that moment. I think they'll surprise us. And I think that the environment is such that there's a very clear business case for them to do that. And so we can do that. It helps us. It helps those that come next to us and after us as well.
Well said.
Yeah, I love that. It's very well said. And I think that this kind of rolls a little bit into maybe a question that we can roll with imposter syndrome and getting people to speak up, and that clarifying of people's objectives and expectations and things like that. But what I'm really keen to do is dive into the audience very quickly, because there's been loads of comments coming through, and I'm very conscious that we want to keep those flowing. So thank you here for those that are joining. We've got Christina here from Colorado, Kansas City as well. Lisa's a regular attendee, so lovely to have you back, Lisa. Kathleen, I could also go out for a coffee with Chicago area people. Love that, Kathleen. We've got Tony here as well, in the UK. Just loads coming through. Someone, Olivia Odell, I feel like I think we've spoken. Really lovely, really loving the broadcast. We've got Sean here saying perception versus perspective. Love that. Andrew, our CCO here at FDI, transparency on both sides, always for the win. Completely agree. So keep some questions as well coming through. But just wanted to roll on to this one here within the imposter syndrome piece, because I think that you talking about communication, that's sometimes what people potentially have struggled with sometimes, is that communication element, whether that is, even not talking about returning to work. It's just that breaking of the glass ceiling and having the courage to sometimes speak up and look at what that next career development opportunity is and things like that. But what I guess this question, how can individuals overcome feelings of imposter syndrome, is something like statistically 68% of the workforce globally would have experienced it at some point in their career. And interestingly, the pharmaceutical life sciences space, almost 78%. There's quite a high percentage in that, in our specific industry. So any advice I guess, that have you got for the audience that maybe might be feeling that lack of self-confidence and self-doubt? I'll come to you, Sarena, with this.
Yeah, I think one thing to highlight, right? I think imposter syndrome is not just happening to women. Men has imposter syndrome as well. In other words, for those women in the audience, don't feel like this is a woman's privilege, right? We all face self-doubt from time to time. That's number one. And two is, it is indeed not uniquely a return to work challenge, right? I think I remember I have severe imposter syndrome, especially when I first started working after graduate school. And, that's a story for another time. But I think, ultimately, I think, first of all, recognizing that you have doubt is probably step number one, right? And recognizing this is, by the way, not unusual, nor is it uncommon, because most of us are unfortunately perfectionists. We want to do the best we can, and we want to know what we do, and we want to do it well. And part of the challenge of life sciences is this is a demanding industry where there's a lot of scientific knowledge required, regardless of whether we have a background in science or not, right? So, and I think when you're surrounded by super smart people, so, very scientifically educated people, it's very common for us to feel, oh my gosh, am I in the right role, right? Am I up to the snuff? So I think just recognizing this is common and it is okay is part of it, right? Because once you recognize it and you name it, then you can start figuring out how you deal with it. And I think, to me, the strategy of dealing with it, especially for those of us who have to take time off and leave of absence, is a couple of things, right? Question is, during your time of leave of absence, what are you doing to help yourself mentally continue to be on top of it?
Yeah.
Because I would argue, even for, new parent, when you have babies, it is perfectly good. In fact, it's actually good for your mental well-being to always start thinking about, gosh, how do I keep on top of what's happening in the industry? What's happening with the company? And by the way, am I scheduling a bit of time, maybe a coffee chat with my team on a regular basis, just so I keep up with what's going on? So I think giving yourself that confidence, knowing that you're on top of it and having a strategy of dealing with it will help sort of mitigate some of that doubt, especially when you return to work. And I think the second piece related to that, probably also, for those who had some time, right, especially during this time of absence, and I saw some questions about returning to work after redundancy. If you have the time, use the opportunity to continue to have a growth mindset about learning new things. There's amazing amount of resources available out there in terms of building new skills, learning new things. So the question is, how do you, find the time to do that? And again, I would argue, even if you're taking time off because you had a baby or because you had personal reasons to do so, sometimes be able to find a bit of a, time in that period of time on a regular basis, just to continue to sort of update your professional knowledge, is actually a really good way to break up the day, right? And break up this so that you continue to have this integration. So I would say, have a plan in terms of how you ramp up, how you minimize this question of doubt, especially when you first enter, but recognizing it is perfectly normal, and tying it back to our earlier conversation, knowing, so be transparent about it with yourself and with your team that trusts you, and have the discussion of how do I overcome it is, probably part of it.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. Some really, really good takeaways in that, Sarena. And I think for me, it is bite-sized chunks, breaking it down. It's that self-awareness or that acknowledgement and then just knowing it's absolutely fine to be feeling like that.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it is just the sense of overwhelm, isn't it? It's like, returning to work, whether it's a sabbatical, whether it's maternity, whatever it might well be. It's, technology advances so much, and in 12 months, it could be your businesses launch new technologies or systems and you're not familiar with them. It could be team cultural dynamics have completely changed, or new team members have joined. It could be various different situations. But if you break it down and think, well, actually, maybe I will reconnect with the team before I start. Maybe I'll go for a coffee. Maybe I will look into the new platforms and tools that technology-wise are actually being used before. It probably just will help that confidence build, won't it, before then stepping back in. But that's what came to mind when you were speaking, Sarena. But Christina, same question to you.
Yeah,
what are your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, I love Serena's perspective on this. I would add, one, I talked earlier about kind of knowing your value and being able to describe it. I think we have just got to get on board with, I know what I'm really good at. Let me make a list of it. Put it on paper, brag, be very comfortable in your own mind, what you are good at and what your value is, and know how great you are. I think flowing out of that is being authentic. So we are not looking for cookie cutter leaders out of the box. We're looking for you, right? What do you bring? That's the authentic you. That's maybe you're a little edgier. Maybe you're, I tend to not be a super polished, buttoned up presenter. People tell me I do the Italian, I'm Italian and they can tell. That's okay. I used to feel like, I need to kind of be a little more formal, but that's not me. And I think that the more you can just embrace exactly who you are and feel confident and know how valuable that is, that might be driving what makes you feel like an imposter, because you're a little different, but that's actually why you're in the room, your authentic self. I talked earlier about we are each other's superpower. Find your people who you can call up and they will tell you how incredible you are. That is important when you have a moment that you can't tell yourself. And the last thing I would say is, I also think it's good to just set an intention or make a decision to just say no to self-doubt, because sometimes when we tell ourselves, I can do it, then we can do it. So I think if you tell yourself, I don't have self-doubt, if I'm at the table, I belong there. That's where I belong. And if I somehow am this cool imposter snuck in as the door was closing, now I'm at the table, well, that's pretty cool also. You somehow managed to, pull the Star Wars move and like slide under the door and, dress up like someone who belongs there. Own it. take that opportunity. You're at the table. So
Yes.
I think there's also a little bit of that. Like, yeah, maybe you're not good enough, but you know what?
Positive
You are.
Yeah, I love it. Positive mindset, growth mindset, as Sarena said as well. And, I think conscious of time as we're coming up to the 45 minutes, but, Maria here has said Serena's comments are great. It's a matter of allowing yourself to ramp up and be on top of the things without a rush. I love the superpower that Christina's mentioned. And we've got a few questions here that kind of, merge in, if you don't mind. So Susan, what about returning from a medical leave or from an illness? Tony, what about returning from redundancy? And what about, a different career that allows remote work and now ready to transition back? I'm thinking in the last kind of 10 minutes, both of what Sarena and Christina has said around, kind of assessing your superpowers, what it is you're good at, or if you're returning, whether it's redundancies, change of career, illness, but it's kind of to build that confidence. It's getting back out there, knowing maybe, the team that you're going to be working, you're going to be going and joining back with, having coffees with them prior to, restarting, maybe not restarting full time, but going part time, easing yourself in from an hour's or a day's perspective and coming to an agreement with your employer, as Serena's previously mentioned, kind of trying to come to the table with an employer with what's something that suits and works with you, but trying to create almost a solution mindset for the employer's perspective so it fits both sides of the table is a great bit of advice. And the only thing we haven't really touched upon, because I think we could talk a lot about this topic generally, is things like mentorship. It's the importance of your network. My advice, if you are returning from redundancy or even from an illness, anything really, it's go and start connecting to people either in your network or outside of your network that you've not spoken to before, that could be in a similar position from a career perspective than that you were in, and just get advice, connect, listen to other people's stories, be inspired by them. Some things, hopefully, Tony, Susan, that answers a couple of your questions there. Not sure if there's anything to add, Sarena, Christina, in regards to those.
Maybe one thing just to add on what you said, Louise. Indeed, I think regardless of what was the circumstances, right, prior to returning to work, I think as we've been saying in the last 45 minutes, I would offer a couple of things. One is, do know what you're looking for, right? Because ultimately, nobody can tell your story other than yourself, right? You have to own your own narrative and know what you're looking for, including your values, your boundaries, and what are you looking for next.
Yep.
And the second piece, I think part of knowing what you're looking for is reflect and learn this time that was, that's different from your normal path. If it was redundancy, better nothing to be ashamed of, right? I mean, unfortunately, there are redundancies and layoffs around the world, right? So what did you learn from that experience? If it was a, return from remote to physical work environment, what did you learn from that previous experience, and why do you want to transition now? And I personally found, someone who take the time to reflect on their own learning and be able to translate to what they want to do next is the most valuable thing, right? Because that means that we're growing. And from an employee perspective or from an employer perspective, those are frankly the best people to have on your team, right? So I would encourage everybody to do that, especially during this transition period, right? What did you learn? What did I reflect on? How did that make me a better person as a result of it? So I will offer that, Louise.
I think that's brilliant. Christina, were you going to add something?
One add and then one separate point. I think to Serena's point, I've hired or worked with a couple of people who've come recently after redundancy, and all three of them said to me that it was they were all very crushed when it happened. They said they were so grateful for it. It was one of the best things that had happened to them because they had time to do X, Y, and Z. And then they both kind of moved into this other career. And I think as an interviewer and also as someone kind of working with someone who's just finished that journey, that's a really powerful message. Like, I loved my job. It wasn't how I wanted to leave, but I'm so grateful for it now in hindsight because I was able to do. I mean, I think that shows an employer that you're optimistic, that you're creative, that you are here for the new job and in full. That I think that there's a lot of there can be positives to that. I think a lot of people would say that kind of in hindsight. I wanted to address the illness question because I think that's really important. And this is about life sciences. So I think that there's a few things. One, just acknowledging that is really hard. That is very different than coming back after a baby and trying to fit everything in. So that's really hard. I know when I've had health issues, I have kind of gotten through them without really talking about them very much at work. I don't think that's the best way to do it. And I think there's probably, as we've talked about, just ways to be more communicative about what you need, your boundaries, what you still can do that would be probably a better approach to that. And I think that it takes a lot of courage and bravery to do that. And I also think from working in the life sciences, from all of my own health issues, I had a daughter with kind of very bad asthma and a lot of events that I had to handle during the workday for a couple of years. I mean, I have family that have had health issues. I think when we work in the life sciences, whether it's our own or others' health issues, we're navigating a healthcare system that we also work in. And that we are then patient advocates. I mean, actually, my daughter's asthma has been so useful in my job because I can talk about how her ER versus her specialist versus the two pediatricians. I mean, you could never study her asthma in existing data because her outcomes are everywhere. And that's been really useful to me in my job. Working with my parents and with some, as you watch, as you are a patient advocate, that can help you navigate your job because you have these firsthand experiences that the FDA is coming out and saying patient-centeredness. Well, you can't really be patient-centered if you've never been a patient or been a patient advocate. And so there is a power that comes with you. Yeah. I think it's helpful for us to articulate that to the extent we're comfortable and try to harness some of that knowledge because it's pretty unique to have gone through those experiences. We don't want them, but we have them. So we can kind of carry them with us.
I love that. And I think, the advice out there is to encourage people to feel comfortable, hopefully sharing that as well, because when you're not, like you've said, through your own experiences, your advice is to be able to talk about that, communicate that might be more helpful, and also letting the employer maybe understand a little bit more around some of the challenges to support you through that. But this all comes back down to authenticity and everything as well, something that you were earlier mentioning before that. But I think it's some really, really great advice, and I'm confident that the audience have got quite a lot to take from the last 45 minutes. We tend to always wrap up with this question, and I do love this. It could simply be a word, a phrase, a sentence, but what is the best bit of advice you would perhaps give your younger self if you could go back in time and say, so Sarena, I'm going to come to you with this first.
Wow. There's a lot.
There's a lot.
I will say, lead your own life, right? Lead your own life the way that you want it. Because the truth is, we all have very different career paths and different life choices.
Yeah.
And it's perfectly okay, right? As we, say, own your narrative. But I think as a younger self, you don't have to look to others and conform to whatever career path other people have and look up to it, right? Design your own. That's what I would say.
That. Lovely. And you, Christina, what's your one bit of advice?
I think just to triple down on just enjoy it. I mean, yes, this can be hard. A lot of it is super fun. It's fun to be early in your career looking at leaders dealing with issues that you don't have to deal with. It's fun to be a leader dealing with issues and have to solve those problems. It's fun to juggle the babies and work in hindsight. You don't get to do it for very long. These moments pass. So I think I feel grateful for every moment I enjoyed it, and for those moments that felt really hard. Kind of wish I could have maybe laughed in some of those. So I think I'm better at doing that now. But enjoy it. This is this is meant to be an adventure. It's meant to be fun.
Yeah, I love that. And to be honest, both of your responses kind of coincide together, right? Choosing your own narrative ultimately should mean that you are doing something you enjoy. And 100%, Christina, I am fully on board with, you got to have fun along the journey. We spend a lot of time at work, and sometimes hour-wise more at work than we do at home, and we've got to enjoy it. We've got to have fun. And I think 2 great bits of advice there, so thank you. And a huge thank you to the audience for joining us. Sorry if we've not managed to get through some of the questions or everybody commenting, but it's been great to share this with you, Christina and Sarena. I've loved having you on with some great bits of advice on this topic. I think we've got Our podcast's also being released, Georgia. Have you?
Yes, we do. We've got a number of episodes out now. Please do find them through our Lift Up community page. The link is in the comments, but it's also up here for anyone who's keen to join us on Lift Up Journeys.
Thank you. So we've got the Lift Up podcast being launched. Another one was today, as George has just said, and we'll be live again in about a month's time. It's been great having Christina and Sarena. This is recorded, so this will be able to be watched, time and time again. So this material will be out on LinkedIn for you to share with any colleagues, etc. So thank you so much. Thank you to Georgia as well for joining me today, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon, wherever you are in the globe. Thanks for joining. Take care. Bye bye.
Definitely.
Thanks.
Thanks.